So the first competency we're talking about is knowledge and understanding of higher education and student affairs. To me, this competency means that a student affairs professional understands the work they're doing broadly, as well as the work environment they're in, which is obviously a higher education environment. However, I believe that for one to perform their work successfully, it's necessary for a student affairs professional to learn about the past, present, and the future of this profession, as well as of higher education overall. To me, this competency is about making connections between student affairs and the world, with the political, social, and cultural climate in the world. Achieving this competency to me means that one is able to draw on their knowledge of the history of higher education and student affairs and recognize advantages and disadvantages in our current system of higher education in order to effectively improve and solve issues surrounding social justice. If you were to ask me to order the course subjects in K through 12 from least favorite to favorite, history would be the first one to show up on the list. I have never had much interest in learning about the past because I thought the future was what mattered. However, this program has helped me realize that in order to shape a better future, it's necessary to learn about the past. The course I took, called American Higher Education, was one of the first courses I took in this program. So in this course, I learned about the history of American higher education from the 1600s through the present day, as well as the challenges we faced in the past and we're still facing currently. I was surprised to learn that before football was standardized and professionalized, it was a brutal sport. I learned about the history of the literacy societies and Greek letter organizations. I read about the dark student experiences at Dartmouth College, where they had to work very hard in order to earn their rights to study. They were almost imprisoned because they had to ask for permission from the doctor to leave the school. They were willing to do anything, including becoming the servant of one of the college's founder, Eleazar Wheelock, in order to go back home and see their family members. I learned that the goal for founders to have this college was to create students who would become missionaries to their own kind and contribute to white society. From the students' point of view, the teaching at Dartmouth was aimed to look down upon the Indian population. I learned that the standards at early women's college were much lower compared to other higher education institutions. These colleges were not teaching advanced knowledge to them. They were teaching just high school level courses instead of real college courses. It was largely believed that women's job was marriage and motherhood. Therefore, it was believed that there was no need for women to be further educated. I learned that evidence was needed to prove that women deserved a college education. Learning this history made me appreciate the environment I had or I was in college, but it also made me think about various areas in our current system that all the isms and oppression and microaggression that still exists. As my final assignment in American Higher Education course, I presented my research paper called Chinese International Students in American Higher Education. In this paper, I explained the challenges that Chinese international students face in chronological order of the past, present, and future by conducting literature reviews. We all know that China continues to be one of the leading source countries of international students, and also the United States is among one of the top host countries for Chinese students to come and study. So I thought it was important to pay attention to the tremendous amount of dissimilarities in two countries' educational systems and their student-teacher interaction styles and classroom environments and cultures. There are so many differences between the two countries and their cultures, so there are complications and challenges in Chinese international students' life in the US during their college time. Not only did I talk about the past challenges Chinese international students faced and the current challenges they're facing, I also suspect different challenges that might be faced by Chinese international students in the future, because in the US, Chinese students are facing stricter policies against them, which would result in more difficulties to be granted a student visa. And for those who are granted international student status to study in the US, especially those who are funded by Chinese government, they may be perceived as Chinese spies by some American faculty and students or whoever in the US. So that may very well hinder their overall student experience in the US. In my transitions course, I did a campus racial histories assignment to research specifically about Portland State University. I learned that PSU was the first institution to offer Black Studies degrees to students in the Northwest in 1970s. And another current issue I learned about in this course was that we need to think about how policy, culture, and community are all interconnected within student affairs, and we as student affairs professionals need to consistently think about how we can change in order to serve the community better. It's important to think about who's not in the conversation or who's not participating and why not, in order to for higher education to be more inclusive. So from what I've mentioned so far, I see a connection between how Dartmouth students were treated back in time and how current international students are treated. Many universities today make it clear that they prioritize and value cultural diversity, but the fact is that they're not really committing to it. There are still many hidden curriculums that only insiders consider to be natural and universal, but one wouldn't know unless they have been in the US for a very long time. Many institutions fail to acknowledge that how everything is done here in the US is not how it's done in other countries. For example, domestic students are fairly aware of the function of an academic advisor, but international students may have never heard of the words academic advisor, and they may not know what it means to talk to an advisor, and they may even think they're in trouble if they talk to them, because in some countries, students only talk to teaching faculty or staff when they make mistakes and when they need to be called into office. This significantly hinders the advisor's ability to assist students because students are fearful of them and might not disclose any concerns to them. I think the universities are expecting international students to know how American higher education works when international students are extremely underprepared with hidden curriculum like this. Many international students today are just like the students at Dartmouth in history. They are willing to do anything to achieve their goals because it took them a lot to be here. However, they were not provided with adequate resources to prepare for the American higher education experience, which would create more roadblocks that challenge their success in college. I think one way to help with this acculturation situation is to cre- create programs that prepare international students before they enter the American college environment. For example, universities can offer virtual orientations to introduce all the different functional areas and resources on campus, or anything else that might be considered a hidden curriculum, so that international students know who to go to when with their concerns or questions um, before they even come on campus. It would also be beneficial for international students to be paired with students who are already familiar with the campus. This way, international students at least have someone to go to that's very easily accessible and knows who they should contact for help. From the courses I've taken and articles I've read and websites I've visited in the past 2 years or so, I have gotten a pretty good of a general idea of the different functional areas in student affairs, and I've learned in depth about a few of them. The the area that I am most familiar with and therefore most confident to talk about is student care because of my student care case manager internship. Student care is an office designed to help students learn and understand OSU's policy and procedures, and then problem solve with the university and community and access referrals for personal matters or emergencies. While I understand not all higher education institutions have a student care function, I was fortunate to get this internship opportunity at OSU, which allowed me to get to know and work with various different offices and departments. In academic advising, I helped take in student care inquiries that were submitted by students' advisors because they were concerned about their advisees' well-being. I frequently communicated with the advisors to update them with new information regarding their inquiries or to talk with them to figure out the possible options for students to continue to be successful as a student and as an individual. In most cases, we would also inform other departments such as counseling and psychological services, Academic Success Center, and Survivor Advocacy and Resource Center about students' situations to ensure they are supported throughout the university. I learned about and interacted with many more functional areas of the institution and was able to connect students with appropriate resources when necessary. In this position, I have also worked with teaching faculty to inform them of a student's absence in class when the student was not able to do so themselves. In addition, I worked very closely with our COVID Care Ambassador program. My role was to ensure that students who tested positive for COVID-19 are assigned to a care ambassador within their college so that they're reached out by the ambassadors to talk about useful information and resources related to COVID-19 and support them through this difficult time. The most important thing I learned from this experience is that it takes more than one functional area to holistically support students. Every functional area is interconnected with one another, and we as student affairs professionals need to have a good understanding of each of them in order to efficiently assist our students with their needs. One of the key issues in today's higher education is serving an increasingly diverse student population or supporting underrepresented students. I have talked about a fraction of the different experiences international students are getting out of American higher education, but there are many other underrepresented identities in our students that are experiencing injustice in our current education system. In the student development in universities and colleges too course, we talked about various theories that come from culturally diverse perspectives, such as Baxter Magolda's Path to Self-Authorship and Perry's intellectual scheme. We talked about how American higher education institutions are not paying enough attention to make changes to their predetermined forms of knowledge and what is considered knowledge. I learned about indigenous knowledge, funds of knowledge, and the community cultural wealth model, which in my opinion should be applied in the curriculum of our higher education in order to diversify our approved ways of knowing. In this course, I also learned that similar to what international students are experiencing, the overall college environment is not welcoming enough to First Nations students because to them, going to the university means that they have to abandon or sacrifice their indigenous consciousness, inherited cultures, languages, or customs in order to be successful in the mainstream institutions. American higher education institutions usually expect their students to adapt to and abide by the institutional policies, practices, programs, and standards regardless of where they come from because they want the students to be integrated towards similar institutional goals. But how do we make this work for the trend of the increasingly diverse student body? I think the most difficult obstacle to overcome in this issue is that it's necessary for universities to create an environment where members of the community not only celebrate their own histories, but also get help in understanding how their lives are shaped by the society's forces. I think the most difficult obstacle to overcome in this issue is that universities need to create an environment where members of the community not only celebrate their own histories, but also get help in understanding how their lives are shaped by the society's forces. This way, each student would be able to deepen their understanding of their development and make choices that are most suited for them. As student affairs professionals, we should assist students in this process by providing space for them to explore their options and guide them through the decisions they make. The last thing I'll talk about here is legal issues in higher education. In order to serve students in the field of student services, we should possess basic knowledge in any aspect of a student's life so that when a problem is presented, we have a general sense of which direction to go in order to solve the problem. I think studying legal issues is especially crucial because it helps us understand the reasons behind those issues and also provides us with different perspectives so we can look at the issues in a more objective way. This field is also around the ever-changing environment, which makes it more important for us to be aware of the past legal issues, keep updated on current issues, and think about potential legal issues that we may encounter in the future. In my legal issues course, I have learned about different sources of laws as well as the structures of different types of courts. I explored legal issues around the topics of online learning, cybersecurity, and international students by looking into related past cases through the inbox discussions. My legal and policy memorandum addressed legal issues among international students that can be categorized into 4 categories: students' legal immigration or non-immigration status in the U.S., discrimination, academic integrity, and institutional policies. International students are a unique population when it comes to legal issues because while dealing with legal issues, they might also be challenged by discrimination, academic stress, English language, and the lack of communication with staff, faculty, and other members of the institution. I believe that institutions should increase funding in programs that educate our students about their rights and the resources available to them so that when something happens, they can react accordingly and quickly. We should also provide legal counsel in different languages or have translators on site so that students who prefer to speak their native language would feel comfortable to do so.